The $80 million system just died. $80 million gone in a shower of sparks and the grinding shriek of metal tearing itself apart. In the control room, engineers are shouting over each other while their billion-dollar investor checks his watch. 1 hour. That's all they have left. But outside in the hallway, a maintenance man in a stained uniform is sketching something on his daughter's pink notebook. Something that might save them all. If anyone bothered to look. If anyone thought a janitor could possibly understand what their best engineers can't fix. But here's the thing, he's not really a janitor at all. That's where our story begins today. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The 6:47 a.m. bus wheezed to a stop outside the Novaris Automation headquarters, like it did every weekday morning, belching diesel fumes into the cold air. Ethan Walker stepped down onto the sidewalk, his tool bag catching on the handrail because the strap had been frayed for months, and he kept forgetting to replace it. Behind him, moving carefully down the steps with both hands gripping the rails, came Chloe. 6 years old, wearing a purple backpack almost as big as she was. "Careful, Bug," Ethan said, reaching back without looking. Her small hand found his automatically. "I'm being careful," she said, annoyed in that particular way only a 6-year-old could manage before 7 in the morning. "You're the one who almost dropped your bag." Fair point. The Novaris building rose in front of them like a monument to everything Ethan used to be, all glass and steel and the kind of architectural confidence that came from having venture capital money to burn. The early morning sun hit the windows just right, turning the whole tower into a blade of light that probably looked great in the marketing materials. Ethan's reflection in those windows looked exactly like what he was, a tired guy in a maintenance uniform that had seen better days, carrying a tool bag held together with duct tape and poor decisions. "Is Miss Patricia here yet?" Chloe asked, looking toward the side entrance where the janitorial staff usually gathered. "Probably. She's always early. She said she'd teach me how to draw horses today." "That right?" "Uh-huh. Real horses, not like the stupid ones I draw." Ethan glanced down at her. "Your horses aren't stupid. They look like dogs with long faces. Some dogs have long faces." "Dad." All right. I'm sure Patricia's horses are better." They walked around to the employee entrance, the one without the fancy automatic doors, and the receptionist who looked at maintenance workers like they were tracking mud across her personal carpet. Ethan swiped his badge. It took 2 tries because the magnetic strip was wearing out, and the lock clicked open with a sound like disapproval. The hallway inside smelled like floor wax and the particular kind of recycled air that all corporate buildings seem to share. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, not quite in sync with each other, creating a barely perceptible flicker that most people never noticed. Ethan noticed. He noticed lots of things people missed. "Go find Patricia," he said, setting his tool bag down. "I need to check the work order." "Can I have lunch money?" He pulled out his wallet, thin, leather, worn smooth at the corners, and counted out $6 in bills that had been folded and refolded too many times. "That'll get you through the vending machine. Don't spend it all on chips." "What else would I spend it on?" "Chocolate, cookies, those weird gummy things you like." "Those are chips adjacent," Chloe said seriously, pocketing the money. "Technically." "When did you learn the word adjacent?" "Miss Patricia taught me. It means next to something." "I know what it means, Bug." "Then why'd you ask?" Ethan just looked at her. She grinned, her mom's grin, the one that used to gut him, but now just made him tired in a different way, and took off down the hallway toward the break room where Patricia usually set up her morning crossword station. He watched her go, that purple backpack bouncing with each step, and felt the familiar weight of every choice that had brought them here settle onto his shoulders like snow accumulating on a roof. 3 years ago, this wouldn't have been his life. 3 years ago, he'd been somewhere else entirely. But 3 years was a long time to carry the past around. Ethan picked up his tool bag and headed toward the maintenance office to grab his assignment sheet. The building was just starting to wake up. He could hear the executive elevator humming to life somewhere above, and voices echoed from the engineering wing where the early arrivals were probably already drowning themselves in coffee and panic. Today was the big demonstration, the one everyone had been losing sleep over for months. The one Ethan knew was going to fail. He'd heard it yesterday, just a whisper buried in the machine's normal operating rhythm. Wrong frequency. a phase offset in the encoder system that would stay hidden right up until the moment it tore the whole production line apart. He'd mentioned it to Ryan Brooks, one of the younger engineers who sometimes actually listened to him, but Ryan had been too busy running cable diagnostics to pay attention. "I'll flag it for Damien," Ryan had said, distracted, already walking away. Sure you will, Ethan had thought. And Damien Cross will definitely listen to a maintenance worker's concern about encoder calibration. That'll happen right after hell freezes over and the cafeteria starts serving decent coffee. The maintenance office was empty except for Jorge, who was half asleep in a chair with his feet propped up on a desk that had definitely seen better decades. "Morning," Ethan said. Jorge grunted something that might have been a greeting or might have been indigestion. Hard to tell. "Work orders up yet?" Another grunt. Jorge gestured vaguely at the clipboard hanging by the door without opening his eyes. Ethan grabbed it and scanned down the list. Standard stuff. Replace the light fixture in conference room B. Investigate the rattling sound in the HVAC system on the third floor. Clean up whatever mystery fluid was leaking in the secondary storage bay. The glamorous life of building maintenance. Nothing about the demonstration lab, which made sense. That was engineer territory. Sacred ground where maintenance workers only entered with explicit permission and usually an escort, as if they might accidentally contaminate something with their blue-collar presence. "You hear about the demo today?" Jorge asked, eyes still closed. "Hard not to." $80 million, that's what I heard. Some investor guy flying in from Singapore or somewhere. "San Francisco. Same difference. You think it'll work?" Ethan thought about the sound he'd heard. That tiny deviation in frequency that meant something deep in the system was already starting to tear itself apart. He thought about Damien Cross's face when Ryan had probably tried to pass along the warning, if he'd even bothered. He thought about how systems failed when people were too proud to listen. "No," Ethan said. "I don't think it'll work." Jorge opened one eye. "That's a hell of a thing to say on demo day." "You asked." Most people lie when you ask them questions like that. Social convention and whatnot. "I'm not most people." "Yeah, I noticed. You're the guy who fixes the coffee maker when it breaks instead of just complaining about it like the rest of us." "Someone has to." "That's exactly what I mean," Jorge said, closing his eye again. "Not most people." Ethan left him there and headed toward the elevator. He had a light fixture to replace, and that seemed like a better use of his morning than thinking about the very expensive demonstration that was going to collapse in front of a billionaire investor because nobody wanted to listen to the maintenance guy. The elevator took forever, which was normal. When it finally arrived, the doors opened to reveal Miranda Chen from HR and two engineers Ethan didn't recognize, all of them clutching coffee cups like life preservers and looking at their phones with the glazed intensity of people trying to manifest success through sheer force of will. They barely glanced at him as he stepped in. He pressed 3. Miranda was going to 5. The engineers were headed all the way to 7, where the demonstration lab sprawled across the entire floor like a temple to automation technology. "Did you see the email?" One of the engineers was saying. Young guy, probably fresh out of grad school, still believed in things like meritocracy and fair compensation. "Which one?" "We've gotten like 40 emails about today." "The one from Olivia, about protocol." "Oh God, another protocol email." "She's just covering all the bases," Miranda said diplomatically, which was her job. "This is a major presentation. It's overkill is what it is. We've run this system 100 times. Not at full operating capacity, Ethan thought. Not under real stress conditions. You've been babying it, running it at 70%, maybe 80 on a good day because you're terrified of breaking it before the big show. And that means you have no idea what's going to happen when you finally push it to 100. The elevator stopped at 3. Ethan got out. Conference room B was at the end of the hallway, past the smaller engineering offices where the junior staff worked. The light fixture inside had apparently been flickering for a week, which seemed like the kind of thing someone could have mentioned earlier. But that was corporate maintenance in a nutshell. Everything was both urgent and completely ignorable until someone important noticed it. He set down his tool bag and dragged a chair underneath the fixture. The fluorescent tubes looked fine, which meant the problem was probably in the ballast. He popped the cover and peered inside. "Excuse me." Ethan looked down. A woman stood in the doorway, mid-40s, sharp business suit, the kind of carefully controlled expression that came from years of dealing with people who were about to waste her time. "Your maintenance?" she asked. "That's what the uniform suggests. I need this room in 20 minutes. How long will you be?" Ethan looked back at the fixture. The ballast was definitely shot. 30 minutes, probably. "That's not what I asked. You asked how long I'd be. I'm telling you." Her expression tightened. "Perhaps I wasn't clear. I need this room in 20 minutes. We have a pre-demonstration briefing." "Then you're going to have it with a flickering light, because this ballast is dead, and I need to replace it." "Can't you just what? Wish it fixed? I'm maintenance, not a miracle worker." She looked at him like he'd just tracked mud across her personal carpet. "I'll speak to your supervisor." "You do that. He's probably asleep in the maintenance office. Tell Jorge I said hi." She left, heels clicking away down the hallway like gunshots. Ethan went back to work. The ballast came out easier than expected, small victories, and he had the replacement installed in 25 minutes. The light came on steady and clean, fixed. One small thing in the universe working the way it was supposed to. He was packing up his tools when he heard it, a low hum from somewhere above. Mechanical. Familiar. The demonstration system powering up for a test run. Ethan paused, head tilted, listening. The hum increased, climbing in frequency as the system accelerated. 30% capacity, 40, 50. The sound was smooth, controlled, exactly what you'd expect from a state-of-the-art automated production line. And then, there. So faint most people would miss it. A tiny vibration in the wrong frequency range. The phase offset he'd heard yesterday. Still there, still waiting. Ethan stood perfectly still, tool bag in hand, listening to an $80 million disaster warming up 7 floors above him. The system powered down. Test run complete. He could imagine the engineers up there congratulating each other, checking their data, confirming that everything looked perfect on the screens. All green lights. All systems nominal. They had no idea. He thought about going up there, walking into that lab and trying one more time to explain what he was hearing. But he could already picture how it would go. Damian Cross, with his MIT degree and his absolute certainty that a maintenance worker couldn't possibly understand advanced encoder systems. Security escorting Ethan out, while engineers watched and tried not to smirk. Chloe asking him later why people were mean to him. No. He'd tried. He'd done his part. If they wanted to ignore him, that was their choice. Ethan picked up his tool bag and headed back to the elevator. He had an HVAC system to investigate. The building's slow descent into entropy wasn't going to manage itself. By 10 a.m., the executive floor was in full panic mode. Ethan could feel it even down in the third-floor mechanical room, the way you could feel a storm coming before the first drops of rain. The HVAC rattle turned out to be a loose mounting bracket. Easy fix, but even while he was working, he could hear the increased foot traffic above. The urgent voices. The particular quality of stress that came from very important people about to do very important things. He was tightening the last bolt when his radio crackled. "Ethan, you there?" Jorge's voice, more awake than it had been at 6 in the morning. Ethan keyed the radio. "Yeah, I'm here. They're calling everyone up to watch the demonstration. CEO's orders. Big show of company unity or something?" "I'm in the middle of something." She specifically said everyone. That includes maintenance. Since when does Olivia Hart care if maintenance watches the Dog and Pony Show? Since she's trying to impress a billionaire, probably? I don't know, man. I'm just telling you what came down through channels. Finish up whatever you're doing and get up to 7. They're starting in 20 minutes. The radio clicked off. Ethan looked at the HVAC system, fixed, stable, doing its job in obscurity like it was supposed to. Then he looked up at the ceiling, toward the 7th floor where a very expensive machine was about to tear itself apart in front of everyone. "Guess we're gonna see a show," he muttered. He found Chloe in the break room with Patricia, both of them hunched over a piece of paper covered in horse drawings that actually did look substantially better than Chloe's usual attempts. "Hey, Bug," Ethan said. "We need to go upstairs for a bit." "Why?" "Company thing. Won't take long." Chloe looked at Patricia, who smiled and patted her shoulder. "Go on, honey. We can finish these later." They took the elevator up with a cluster of other employees, administrative staff, Junior engineers, people from departments Ethan didn't even recognize. Everyone had the same expression: confusion mixed with mild resentment at having their workday interrupted for what was essentially a very expensive company meeting. The seventh floor had been transformed. The demonstration lab took up the entire eastern wing, but they'd set up viewing areas with chairs and monitors for people who couldn't fit in the actual control room. Catering had brought coffee and pastries that probably cost more than Ethan's weekly grocery budget. Everything gleamed under carefully positioned lights, and in the center of it all, visible through reinforced glass walls, sat the system itself. The Novaris Automated Production Line, NAPL, in the acronym Happy World of Corporate Engineering. A marvel of robotics and precision manufacturing, capable of assembling complex components with minimal human intervention. Robotic arms arranged in a carefully choreographed sequence, conveyor systems that could handle thousands of units per hour, sensor arrays that monitored every microscopic deviation from specification. $80 million worth of technology that was about to fail catastrophically because of a phase offset in the encoder calibration that no one wanted to hear about. "Wow," Chloe whispered, staring at the machinery. "That's really big." "Yeah," Ethan said, "it is." "What does it do?" "Makes things. Lots of things. Very quickly." "What kind of things?" "Complicated things. Electronic components, mostly." "Why do they need us to watch?" "Good question, Bug." "Because someone important wants to see it work." They found seats near the back. Ethan could see into the control room from here. A wall of monitors and workstations where engineers clustered around their terminals like priests tending to a digital altar. He recognized most of them. Sarah Kemp on the software side, Marcus Ito handling mechanical systems. And there, in the center of it all, like a general commanding his troops, stood Damien Cross. Damien was exactly what you'd expect from a chief engineer who'd climbed the corporate ladder on a combination of legitimate talent and carefully cultivated confidence. Early 40s, expensive suit jacket draped over his chair, sleeves rolled up to project the image of someone who actually did work with his hands occasionally. He was talking to someone on a headset, gesturing at one of the monitors, every movement precise and controlled. The man had probably never been wrong about anything in his entire life. Or if he had been, he'd managed to convince everyone else they were misremembering. "There she is," someone near Ethan muttered. Olivia Hart entered the control room like she owned it, which, technically, she did. 30 years old and CEO of an automation company valued at close to $500 million. She'd inherited Novaris from her father 2 years ago and immediately set about proving she deserved it, expanding contracts, pushing innovation, making all the right moves. Everything riding on today going perfectly. She spoke briefly to Damien, who nodded and gestured at the monitors with the kind of easy confidence that made Ethan's teeth hurt. Whatever he was saying, Olivia seemed satisfied. She nodded once, sharply, and turned to face the viewing area. "Good morning, everyone," her voice came through the speakers, clear and controlled. "Thank you for joining us today. What you're about to see represents 2 years of development and the combined expertise of our entire engineering team. The Novaris Automated Production Line is designed to revolutionize component manufacturing, reducing production time by 40%, while maintaining tolerances that exceed industry standards." She paused, and Ethan could see the calculation behind her eyes. How much to reveal, how much to hold back, how to frame this for maximum impact. Our investor, Victor Kane, will be arriving shortly. What we demonstrate today will determine the future direction of this company, so I want to thank all of you for your dedication and hard work. This is what we've been building toward. Polite applause rippled through the viewing area. Chloe clapped too because everyone else was doing it. Olivia disappeared from view, heading toward the executive entrance where she'd presumably greet Victor Kane with whatever combination of charm and business acumen the situation required. "Exciting, right?" the woman next to Ethan said, someone from accounting based on her badge. "Sure," Ethan said. "I heard Victor Kane is worth like $3 billion. Probably more by now. Can you imagine? $3 billion. What would you even do with that much money?" Ethan thought about his apartment. 1 bedroom, Chloe slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. The heat worked when it felt like it. He thought about the $34 in his checking account until Friday's paycheck cleared. He thought about how he used to have a career that might have eventually led somewhere comfortable before everything changed. I'd probably waste it, he said. The woman laughed like he'd made a joke. Chloe tugged on his sleeve. Dad, can I have a pastry? Go ahead, just one. She disappeared toward the catering table, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts and the growing certainty that the next hour was going to be very uncomfortable for everyone involved. Victor Kane arrived at 10:47 a.m. in a town car that probably cost more than Ethan's annual salary. The man himself was exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd built a fortune in tech investment. Late 50s, gray hair perfectly styled, suit that fit like it had been designed specifically for his body. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd never had to wonder if he could afford something. Olivia met him at the elevator, and even from a distance, Ethan could see her shift into performance mode. Smile bright, handshake firm, every gesture calculated to project competence and control. They disappeared into the control room, followed by Damien and what looked like half the executive team. Ladies and gentlemen, Damien's voice came through the speakers. We're ready to begin. The lights in the demonstration lab brightened. The robotic arms stood ready, poised like dancers waiting for the music to start. On the monitors, diagnostic data scrolled past in real time. Temperature sensors, torque measurements, positional accuracy down to microns. All green, all perfect, all wrong. The system you're about to see, Damien continued, represents a fundamental advancement in automated manufacturing. We'll be running a full production cycle at maximum operational capacity, something we've never demonstrated publicly before. Of course you haven't, Ethan thought, because you've never pushed it past 80%, and you have no idea what's going to happen when you do. Chloe climbed back into her seat next to him, pastry in hand. Did I miss anything? Not yet, Bug. Is it going to be cool? It's going to be something. On the monitors, a countdown appeared. 60 seconds. Someone in the viewing area actually started a slow clap that thankfully died out immediately. Damien stood at the main control station, hand hovering over the interface. Olivia watched from behind him, arms crossed, face unreadable. Victor Kane stood slightly apart, checking his phone with the distracted air of someone who'd seen 1,000 pitches and wasn't particularly impressed by spectacle anymore. 30 seconds. Ethan found himself leaning forward despite himself, that old engineer's instinct kicking in. He knew what was coming, but part of him still wanted to see it. Wanted to watch the system behavior, analyze the failure mode, understand exactly how the phase offset would manifest when everything finally came apart. 10 seconds. Chloe had stopped eating her pastry, caught up in the tension. 5, 4, 3, 2. Damien pressed the activation sequence. For exactly 47 seconds, the Novaris automated production line was the most beautiful piece of machinery Ethan had ever seen. The robotic arms moved with inhuman precision, each one executing its program sequence in perfect synchronization with the others. Conveyor belts accelerated smoothly, carrying component blanks through each station. Sensors measured and adjusted in real time, maintaining tolerances that would have been impossible with human operators. The speed climbed, 20% capacity, 30, 40. On the monitors, all the diagnostic data stayed green. Temperature nominal. Torque within acceptable ranges, positional accuracy perfect, 50%. The viewing area erupted in spontaneous applause. Someone whistled. Ethan could see Olivia's shoulders relax slightly, could see Damien allow himself the smallest smile of satisfaction. 60%. Ethan heard it first, that tiny deviation in frequency, barely audible over the mechanical symphony. The phase offset, coming out of hiding now that the system was under real stress. 70%. The deviation grew more pronounced. One of the robotic arms was moving fractionally out of sync with the others. Microseconds of difference, but in a system this precise, microseconds mattered. 80%. Someone in the control room noticed something. Ethan could see an engineer, Sarah Kemp, lean forward toward her monitor, frowning. She said something to the person next to her. 90%. The entire system vibrated wrong. Ethan could feel it through the floor, through the air itself. The robotic arms were still moving, still executing their sequences, but they were fighting against each other now, each one trying to compensate for the phase offset and making it worse in the process. Damien must have seen it too. He was staring at his monitors, and Ethan watched his confident expression start to crack around the edges. Are we seeing a deviation in the secondary encoder? someone in the control room asked, voice tight. Compensating, another engineer replied, fingers flying across their keyboard. 100% capacity. The system screamed, not metaphorically, an actual sound, metal grinding against metal as the phase offset finally tore through whatever safety margins the engineers had built in. Warning lights erupted across every monitor, red, red everywhere. Shut down protocol, Damien shouted, but it was too late. The primary robotic arm seized mid-motion, motors locked in position. The conveyor belt kept moving, carrying a component blank directly into the frozen arm. The impact wasn't dramatic, no explosion, no shower of sparks, just a simple collision between an unstoppable force and an immovable object. The component shattered. Fragments scattered across the production line, and somewhere in the system's computerized brain, emergency protocols activated. Every robotic arm froze simultaneously. The conveyor belts ground to a halt. The entire demonstration lab fell into absolute silence. In the viewing area, no one moved. No one spoke. Someone's coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers and hit the floor with a sound like a gunshot. On the monitors, every diagnostic reading had gone red. System failure, complete shutdown. $80 million worth of technology rendered completely inert by a problem that Ethan had identified 24 hours ago. He looked at Chloe. She was staring at the frozen machinery with wide eyes. "Is it broken?" she whispered. "Yeah, Bug," Ethan said quietly. "It's broken." In the control room, pandemonium erupted. Engineers were shouting at each other, pulling up diagnostic screens, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. Damien stood frozen at his station, staring at the monitors like they'd personally betrayed him. And Olivia Hart, Ethan watched her face carefully. Olivia's expression didn't change at all. She just stood there, perfectly still, while her entire company's future collapsed around her. Victor Kane checked his watch. "You have 1 hour," he said, voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Fix it, or I'm canceling the contract." Then he walked out of the control room, leaving behind a silence somehow louder than all the shouting had been. Ethan sat in his chair in the viewing area, holding Chloe's hand, and waited for what came next. The viewing area cleared out fast. People scattered like roaches when the lights come on, some heading back to their desks, others clustering in the hallways to gossip. A few brave souls lingering near the demonstration lab to watch the engineering team's meltdown through the glass walls. Ethan stayed where he was, Chloe still gripping his hand, both of them watching the chaos unfold with the detached interest of spectators at someone else's car accident. In the control room, Damien Cross had gone from confident general to drowning man in the span of about 90 seconds. He was barking orders at his team, pulling up diagnostic screens, stabbing at his keyboard like it had personally offended him. Sarah Kemp was running through the software logs, her face getting paler with each scroll. Marcus Ito had his head in his hands. "We need to isolate the failure point," Damien was saying, loud enough that his voice carried through the glass. "Run a full systems diagnostic. Check every sensor array. There has to be a clear error signature somewhere." "Running it now," Sarah said, not looking up from her screen. "How long?" 5 minutes for a complete scan." "We don't have 5 minutes. We have—" Damien checked his watch. 53 minutes before Kane walks." "Then I guess it'll take 5 minutes," Sarah snapped back. And even from a distance, Ethan could see Damien's jaw tighten. Chloe tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Why are they yelling?" "Because they're scared." "Of what?" "Of being wrong." She thought about that for a moment, swinging her legs from the chair that was too tall for her. "You told them it was going to break. I mentioned there might be a problem. But they didn't listen." "No, Bug, they didn't. That's dumb." Ethan almost smiled. "Yeah, it kind of is." Olivia Hart stood apart from the chaos, positioned near the back wall of the control room like she was trying to physically distance herself from the disaster. Her arms were still crossed, her expression still unreadable, but Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. She was watching Damien work with the focus of someone calculating exactly how much rope to give him before the hanging. Victor Kane hadn't come back. He'd disappeared somewhere, probably to one of the executive conference rooms where he could make calls and contemplate pulling his investment from a company that couldn't even demonstrate its flagship product without it exploding. Or imploding, whatever the technical term was for catastrophic system failure. "The diagnostic's done," Sarah announced. I'm not seeing anything obvious in the software. All the programming executed correctly. The sequences were perfect. Then it's hardware, Marcus said, looking up from his terminal. Has to be. We tested every component, Damien said, and there was something sharp in his voice now, defensive. We ran 300 hours of bench testing before integration. The hardware is solid. Clearly it's not, Sarah muttered. What was that? I said clearly it's not solid because it just failed in front of a billionaire. Damien's face went red. The hardware passed every single specification test. If there's a problem, it's in the integration protocols and software side calibration. Your department, Sarah. Don't put this on software. Our code is clean. Then why did it fail? I don't know, Damien. Maybe because you rushed the final testing phase to meet the demo deadline? The control room went quiet. Someone coughed. Marcus suddenly became very interested in his keyboard. Damien's voice dropped to something dangerous. We followed the approved timeline. Every decision was vetted by the engineering committee. The engineering committee that you chair. Are you suggesting I compromise the project? I'm suggesting, Sarah said, meeting his eyes, that maybe we should have listened when she stopped, looked past Damien, through the glass wall, and directly at Ethan. Damien followed her gaze. For a moment their eyes met, the chief engineer in his expensive shirt and the maintenance worker in his faded uniform. Ethan saw recognition flicker across Damien's face. Recognition and something else. Something that might have been memory or might have been guilt, but was probably just irritation. Damien turned back to his team. Get me a full mechanical breakdown. I want every sensor reading from the moment of failure. Someone find out where the primary stress point was. But Sarah was still looking at Ethan. She said something quiet to Marcus, who glanced over and then away again quickly. The conversation moved on, but Ethan felt the weight of that moment settle into place like a piece in a puzzle he didn't want to solve. Dad, Chloe said, can we go now? This is boring. Yeah, we can go. They stood up just as Ryan Brooks came through the door, the young engineer who'd been running cable diagnostics yesterday when Ethan had tried to warn him. Ryan looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past hour. His shirt was untucked, his hair was sticking up in about 4 different directions, and he was carrying a tablet that he was staring at with the intensity of someone hoping the screen might suddenly reveal the secrets of the universe. He nearly walked directly into Ethan. Sorry, Ryan looked up, blinked. Oh. Ethan. Hey. Hey yourself. Did you see what happened? Kind of hard to miss. Ryan ran his hand through his already disheveled hair. It doesn't make any sense. We tested everything. The system was perfect yesterday. It wasn't, Ethan said quietly. What? It wasn't perfect yesterday, I told you. Remember? The frequency issue. Ryan's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, then memory, then something that might have been horror. The encoder thing you mentioned. The phase offset in the encoder calibration system. Yeah. I thought you were talking about... I didn't realize you meant... Ryan looked down at his tablet, scrolling rapidly through data. When you said encoder issue, I thought you meant a simple calibration drift, not a fundamental phase problem. I know what I said. Did you tell anyone else? I told you. I mean someone on the engineering team, someone who could have actually done something about it. Ethan looked at him. Ryan had the decency to wince. Sorry, Ryan said. That came out wrong. I just meant, I know what you meant. It's just, if this really is an encoder phase offset, that's a major design issue. That's not something that shows up in standard testing. How did you even... Ryan stopped, looked at Ethan more carefully. How did you know? I listened. You listened. To the machine. You can hear it if you know what to listen for. Ryan stared at him like he'd just claimed to speak whale. You diagnosed a phase offset in a precision encoder system by listening to it. That's what I just said. That's... Ryan shook his head. That's not possible. And yet here we are, with a broken system and 50 minutes left on the clock. Someone called Ryan's name from the control room. He glanced back, then looked at Ethan again. There was something calculating in his expression now, like he was solving a math problem in his head. Will you talk to Damien? Ryan asked. No. But if you know what the problem is, Damien had security escort me out of this building yesterday when I tried to mention there might be an issue. You think he's going to listen to me now? Yesterday was, look, he was stressed. We all were. But this is different. The demo failed. Kane's going to pull the contract. If you can actually help, I can help, Ethan said. Question is whether anyone wants to hear it from a maintenance worker. Ryan opened his mouth, closed it again. The person in the control room called his name again, more urgently this time. I have to go, Ryan said. But just don't leave yet, okay? Wasn't planning on it. Ryan jogged back toward the control room, still staring at his tablet, almost colliding with the doorframe on his way through. Ethan watched him go and wondered if anything would come of it. Probably not. People like Damien didn't listen to people like Ethan. That was just how the world worked. Is that man okay? Chloe asked, watching Ryan disappear into the chaos. No, Bug. I don't think any of them are okay right now. They walked back toward the elevator, passing clusters of employees who were trying very hard to look like they were working instead of gossiping about the disaster. The elevator took forever again. When it finally arrived, it was empty except for Patricia, who smiled when she saw them. Well, that was exciting, she said. That's one word for it, Ethan replied. I heard it broke real spectacularly. Sparks and everything. No sparks, just a sudden stop. Still counts as spectacular in my book. Patricia looked at Chloe. You okay, honey? That was a lot of adult panic to witness. Chloe shrugged. Dad says they're scared of being wrong. Your dad's a smart man. The elevator descended in comfortable silence. Patricia got off at 4. Ethan and Chloe continued down to the basement level where the maintenance offices were. Jorge was still at his desk, but he was awake now and staring at his phone with the glazed expression of someone reading very bad news. You here? He asked when Ethan walked in. I was there. Right. Everyone was there. That's what makes it so much worse. Jorge set his phone down. They're saying Kane's going to pull the contract. $80 million, just gone. You know what that means for the company? Layoffs. Massive layoffs. They were planning to hire like 50 new people with that contract money. Now? Jorge shook his head. Now they'll be lucky if they don't have to cut a third of the current staff. Ethan thought about his apartment, about Chloe's school registration for next year, about the careful budget he'd constructed that had exactly 0 room for unexpected unemployment. When will they know? He asked. Kane gave them an hour to fix it. That was... Jorge checked the time. About 15 minutes ago, so 45 minutes left before everything goes to hell. It's already hell. We're just waiting for it to become official. Aren't you optimistic today? I'm realistic. There's a difference. Chloe had settled into one of the spare chairs with her backpack, pulling out a coloring book and a box of crayons that had seen better days. She started drawing with the focused intensity of someone who'd learned to entertain herself during long, boring hours in places kids shouldn't have to be. Ethan's radio crackled. All maintenance staff, this is a general announcement. It was Miranda Chen from HR, her voice tight and professional. Due to the ongoing situation with the demonstration, we're asking all non-essential personnel to remain on standby in their designated areas. Do not leave the building. Further instructions will be provided as the situation develops. The radio clicked off. Non-essential personnel, Jorge repeated. That's what we are now, non-essential. We've always been non-essential. They're just saying it out loud now. Ethan sat down at one of the empty desks and pulled out his own phone. No new messages, no missed calls, just the same empty screen he'd had all morning. He opened his banking app and stared at the $34 in his checking account, then closed it again because looking at it wasn't going to make the number any bigger. The minutes crawled past. Somewhere above them, engineers were tearing apart diagnostic reports and probably turning on each other like sharks. Somewhere else in the building, Victor Kane was probably making calls to other investment opportunities that wouldn't embarrass him in front of his peers. And in the basement maintenance office, 3 people waited for their futures to be decided by forces completely beyond their control. Ethan's radio crackled again. This time it was Ryan Brooks, and he sounded out of breath. Ethan? You still in the building? Ethan picked up the radio. Still here. Can you come up to 7, please? Jorge looked over, eyebrows raised. Ethan hesitated. Why? He asked. Because we're out of options and you said you knew what the problem was. What about Damien? There was a pause. Ethan could hear voices in the background, heated and overlapping. Damien's not in charge anymore, Ryan said finally. Olivia is. and she wants to talk to you." The basement office suddenly felt very quiet. Jorge was staring at him. Chloe had stopped coloring. "Ethan?" Ryan's voice came through the radio. "You there?" Ethan looked at Chloe. She looked back at him with those same eyes her mother used to have, the ones that could see through all his bullshit and make him tell the truth anyway. "Yeah," he said into the radio. "I'm here. So you'll come up?" He should say no. He should tell Ryan to solve his own problems with his own engineers and leave the maintenance worker out of it. He should protect himself and Chloe from getting dragged into corporate politics that could only end badly for someone at his pay grade. But instead he said, "Give me 5 minutes." "Thank you. Seriously, thank you." The radio went silent. Ethan set it down and looked at Jorge, who was shaking his head slowly. "You're really going up there?" Jorge asked. "Apparently." "Into that disaster? With your neck on the line?" "My neck's already on the line. We all work here." "Yeah, but you're volunteering to walk into the fire. Someone has to." Jorge laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You're either really brave or really stupid." "Probably stupid," Ethan said. He looked at Chloe. "Bug, you need to stay here with Jorge for a bit." "I want to come with you." "I know, but this is a work stuff. Adult work stuff." "I've been in the labs before." "Not when they're full of angry engineers who just blew an $80 million contract." Chloe's face scrunched up in that particular way that meant she was about to argue, but Patricia appeared in the doorway like she'd been summoned by parental telepathy. "I'll watch her," Patricia said. "We've got horses to finish anyway." Chloe looked between Ethan and Patricia, calculating her odds. She must have decided the horses were worth more than whatever boring thing her dad was about to do, because she nodded and went back to her coloring book. "Thanks," Ethan said to Patricia. "Don't thank me yet. You might come back without a job." "I might come back without a job anyway." He grabbed his tool bag out of habit, then realized he wouldn't need it and set it back down. Jorge was watching him with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. "Good luck," Jorge said. "Yeah, thanks." The elevator ride up to 7 felt about 10 times longer than it should have. Ethan's reflection stared back at him from the polished metal doors. Faded uniform, bag under his eyes from too many nights not sleeping enough. The general appearance of someone who'd given up on impressing anybody a long time ago. Not exactly the image of someone about to save an $80 million contract. The doors opened to controlled chaos. The viewing area was empty now, except for a few abandoned coffee cups and crumpled napkins. But the control room was packed. Engineers crowded around every workstation, pulling up screens, arguing in the kind of technical shorthand that only made sense to people who'd spent years learning to speak in equations and error codes. Ryan met him at the door. "You came," Ryan said, like he'd actually been worried Ethan wouldn't. "I said I would." "Yeah, but..." Ryan gestured vaguely at the disaster around them. "People say a lot of things." "Where's Olivia?" "Conference room. This way." They walked past the main control area. Damien was there, standing at his terminal, but he wasn't working. He was just standing there, staring at the monitors with the blank expression of someone whose entire worldview had just collapsed. When Ethan walked past, Damien's eyes tracked him with something that looked a lot like hatred. Sarah Kemp caught Ethan's eye and nodded once, sharply. Marcusito just looked confused about why maintenance was being escorted through engineering territory. The conference room was smaller than Ethan expected. Just a table, 6 chairs, and a wall of windows that looked out over the frozen demonstration lab. Olivia Hart stood at the far end, talking on her phone in the kind of voice that was trying very hard to stay calm and professional. "I understand your concerns, Victor. Yes, I know. We're working on it right now." She listened for a moment. "I'm not asking for more time. I'm telling you we've identified the problem and we're implementing a solution. 30 minutes. That's all I need." She hung up and turned to face Ethan. Up close, she looked younger than she had from a distance, or maybe just more tired. There were lines around her eyes that probably hadn't been there 2 years ago when she'd inherited this company and all its problems. "Ethan Walker," she said. It wasn't a question. "That's me. Ryan tells me you know what's wrong with the system. I have a theory." "I don't need theories. I need solutions." Ethan met her eyes. They were gray, he noticed. The kind of gray that could be cold or warm depending on the light, but right now they were just calculating. "The encoder calibration system has a phase offset," he said. It shows up under high-speed stress conditions, makes the robotic arms fight each other instead of working together. Our engineers tested the encoder calibration multiple times. They tested it at reduced capacity, not full operational speed. And you know this how? Because I've been listening to the system run for the past 3 days. I can hear the frequency deviation. Olivia's expression didn't change. You can hear it. Yes. That's not possible. It is if you know what to listen for. She studied him for a long moment, and Ethan could almost see the calculations happening behind her eyes. Risk versus reward. Trust versus desperation. The known quantity of failure versus the unknown quantity of a maintenance worker who claimed to hear problems in machines. Show me, she said finally. I'll need access to the control system. Done. And Damien's probably not going to like this. Damien's not in charge of this decision. I am. Olivia walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at him. If you're wrong, we lose the contract and probably half the company. If you're lying to me, I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. Are we clear? Crystal. Good. Then let's go fix my machine. She walked out, and Ryan gestured for Ethan to follow. They headed back toward the control room, and Ethan could feel every eye in the place turn toward them. The maintenance worker, being escorted like he mattered, like he might actually be able to solve what the entire engineering department couldn't. Damien was waiting for them at the main control station. You're not serious, he said to Olivia. Completely serious. He's maintenance. He doesn't have the clearance. He doesn't have the expertise. He has a theory about the encoder phase calibration that makes more sense than anything your team has come up with in the past 30 minutes. So unless you have a better solution, I suggest you step aside. Damien's face went through several colors. This is insane. You're going to let some... Be very careful about how you finish that sentence, Olivia said quietly. The room went silent. Ethan stood there, tool bag over his shoulder, aware that he was watching something break that probably couldn't be fixed. Damien and Olivia, locked in some kind of power struggle that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with who got to be right when everything else was wrong. Finally, Damien stepped aside. Fine, he said, but when this fails, it's on you. Everything's already on me, Olivia said. That's what being in charge means. She gestured to the control station. Ethan approached it carefully, aware that every engineer in the room was watching him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The interface was familiar. He'd worked with similar systems years ago, before everything changed. The data was laid out across multiple screens, sensor readings, and diagnostic reports, and real-time telemetry from every component in the production line. He pulled up the encoder calibration settings and started scrolling through the data. What are you looking for? Sarah asked from somewhere behind him. Compensation delay in the feedback loop. There should be a timing offset adjustment. We checked the feedback compensation. It was perfect. At what speed? Sarah hesitated. 80% operational capacity. There's your problem. The offset doesn't show up until you hit 90% or higher. The system compensates fine under normal stress. But when you push it to full capacity, the phase delay compounds, makes the whole thing unstable. He found the setting he was looking for, buried 3 menus deep in the calibration interface, the kind of thing you'd only know to check if you dealt with this exact failure mode before. The compensation delay was set to default values that looked perfect on paper, but didn't account for the cumulative effect of operating at maximum speed. Ethan adjusted the timing offset by 7 microseconds. The room was so quiet he could hear his own breathing. That's it, Damien said from somewhere behind him. You changed one setting by 7 microseconds? That's it. That's not a fix, that's a guess. Call it what you want. Ethan stepped back from the control station. Olivia was watching him with those calculating gray eyes, and he couldn't tell if she was impressed or furious or just waiting to see if he'd just saved her company or destroyed what was left of it. Start it up, she said. Olivia, Damien started. Start it up. Sarah moved to the control station, fingers hovering over the interface. She looked at Ethan, then at Olivia, then back at the screen. All systems green, she said quietly. Ready to run. Do it, Olivia said. Sarah activated the startup sequence. The demonstration lab hummed to life for the second time that day, and Ethan held his breath without meaning to. The robotic arms moved through their initialization sequence with the same mechanical grace they'd shown before, but this time Ethan was listening differently. Not just hearing the sound, but feeling it in his bones, in the air itself. The frequency climbed steadily as the system accelerated, and he tracked each increment like counting heartbeats. 20% capacity. The conveyor belts engaged smoothly, carrying test components through the first station. On the monitors, every diagnostic reading glowed green, 30%. The secondary robotic arms activated, their movements synchronized with a precision that made them look almost alive. Sarah was watching her screen with the intensity of someone expecting disaster at any moment, 40%. Still smooth, still stable, but this was where it had been fine before too. This was the safe zone where everything worked the way it was supposed to, 50%. Ethan heard Damien shift his weight behind him. The man was standing close enough that Ethan could feel his presence like heat radiating off asphalt in summer, 60%. The system's hum changed pitch, climbing higher, and for just a second Ethan felt his stomach drop. But no, that was normal. That was the sound of motors working harder, pushing toward full capacity. Not the deviation, not the phase offset tearing itself apart. 70%. Feedback loop is stable, Sarah said, and her voice had a note of surprise in it. Compensation delay is holding, 80%. This was where they'd stopped before, where the testing had always ended, just below the threshold where problems started showing themselves. Ethan watched the speed indicator climb past 81, 82, 83%, and nobody in the control room was breathing. 90%. The deviation should have appeared by now. That tiny frequency shift that meant the phase offset was waking up, getting ready to tear the whole system apart. But Ethan heard nothing, just clean mechanical precision, every component working in harmony instead of fighting itself. 95%. We're approaching the failure threshold from the first run, Marcus said quietly. 100% capacity. The production line roared, not the scream of metal destroying itself, but the pure sound of a machine doing exactly what it was designed to do at maximum operational speed. Robotic arms moved in perfect synchronization. Conveyor belts accelerated smoothly. Components flowed through each station without a single hesitation, without a single error. On the monitors, every reading stayed green. Ethan let out the breath he'd been holding. Behind him, someone made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. Sarah was staring at her screen like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. "How long has it been running?" Olivia asked. 2 minutes, Ryan said, checking his watch. 2 minutes at full capacity. Keep it going. 3 minutes. 4. The system just kept running, flawless and stable, doing in front of everyone what it had failed to do an hour ago. 5 minutes. 6. Someone started clapping, then stopped when nobody else joined in. 7 minutes. At 8 minutes and 43 seconds, Olivia said, "That's enough. Shut it down." Sarah entered the shutdown sequence, and the system powered down smoothly, robotic arms returning to their rest positions, conveyor belts decelerating in perfect synchronization. No emergency stops. No catastrophic failures. Just a clean, controlled shutdown of a machine that actually worked. The control room erupted. Engineers were hugging each other, shouting, laughing with the kind of relief that came from thinking you'd just watched your career implode and then discovering you might still have a future after all. Ryan grabbed Ethan's shoulder and shook it, grinning like a maniac. Even Sarah was smiling, though she was trying to hide it behind professional composure. Damien stood perfectly still, staring at the diagnostic screens, his face the color of old concrete. Olivia pulled out her phone and dialed. "Victor?" "Yes, we're ready. The system's running perfectly. You can come see for yourself." She hung up and looked at Ethan. For a moment, their eyes met across the chaos of the control room, and he saw something there he couldn't quite identify. Respect, maybe. Or calculation. Or just the acknowledgement that everything had changed in the past 10 minutes, and they were both still figuring out what that meant. "Where did you learn to do that?" she asked. "Long time ago. Different job." "What kind of job?" "The kind that doesn't matter anymore." Before Olivia could press further, Victor Kane appeared in the doorway. He walked into the control room with the same measured confidence he'd had before, But this time his eyes went straight to the diagnostic screens, scanning the data with the quick comprehension of someone who actually understood what he was looking at. "Show me," he said. They ran it again. This time there was no nervous tension, no held breath waiting for disaster. The system powered up, accelerated smoothly through every capacity threshold, and ran for a full 10 minutes at maximum operational speed without a single error. Victor watched the whole thing in silence, occasionally checking his tablet to compare the current performance against the original specifications. When the demonstration finished, he nodded once. "That's what I came to see," he said. "Damien, have your team send me the updated technical documentation by end of day. Olivia, my office will have the contract finalized by tomorrow morning." He shook Olivia's hand, nodded to the engineering team, and walked out like he'd just approved a lunch order instead of an $80 million investment. The control room stayed quiet for about 3 seconds after he left. Then the celebration started for real. Someone had found champagne from somewhere, probably been hiding it for this exact moment. Plastic cups appeared, people were toasting and laughing, and already starting to rewrite the story of what had just happened into something they could tell at company parties. Ethan slipped toward the door while everyone was distracted. He'd done what he came to do, fix the problem, save the contract. Now he just wanted to get back to the basement, collect Chloe, and go home before anyone started asking questions he didn't want to answer. Walker. He stopped, turned around. Damian Cross was standing behind him, and his expression was difficult to read. Angry, definitely. Embarrassed, probably. But there was something else there too, something that looked almost like grudging acknowledgement. "You were right," Damian said, and the words looked like they physically hurt coming out. "About the encoder calibration. Yeah, I should have listened, yesterday, when you tried to warn us." "Probably." Damian's jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. "I was an asshole, having security remove you, that was—" He stopped, started again. "That was unprofessional." Ethan waited. This was the part where Damian would probably try to explain why it wasn't really his fault, how the pressure of the demonstration had made everyone act in ways they normally wouldn't, how they were all just doing their best under impossible circumstances. But instead, Damian just said, "I'm sorry." And then he walked away before Ethan could figure out how to respond. Sarah Kemp appeared at Ethan's elbow, holding 2 plastic cups of champagne. She offered him one. "Normally I'd say it's too early to drink," she said, "but I think we've earned it." Ethan took the cup. The champagne was cheap and warm and tasted like victory mixed with regret. "You know what the weird part is?" Sarah said, staring at her cup. "I actually flagged that encoder calibration setting last week. Ran some simulations that suggested it might be unstable under sustained high-speed conditions." "What happened?" Damian said the simulations were theoretical, and we didn't have time to chase down every possible edge case before the demo. She took a drink. "I should have pushed harder." Would he have listened? Probably not, but I should have tried. They stood there in silence for a moment, watching the celebration continue around them. Ryan was explaining something to Marcus with wild hand gestures. Olivia was on her phone again, probably already moving on to the next crisis that needed managing. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "And you can tell me to mind my own business if you want." "Okay." "Ryan pulled your employment file. Says you've been in maintenance here for 3 years. Before that, the record's basically blank. No references, no previous employment history in the system. Just an application and a hire date." Ethan didn't say anything. "But what you did in there," Sarah gestured toward the control room, "that wasn't maintenance knowledge. That was systems engineering at a level most of my team couldn't match. So who are you really?" "Just a guy trying to pay his bills." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." Sarah studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Your business is your business, but if you ever want to talk about it..." She pulled out a business card and handed it to him. "My office is on 6. Doors always open." She walked away before he could refuse the card, leaving him standing there holding it like it might bite him. Sarah Kemp, Senior Software Engineer. Direct line and email address. An invitation to a conversation he'd spent 3 years avoiding. Ethan pocketed the card and headed for the elevator. The ride down to the basement was quiet. Just him and the hum of machinery and his own thoughts, which was usually about 3 things too many to handle comfortably. When the doors opened, he found Jorge and Patricia in the maintenance office, both of them staring at a laptop that was showing what looked like a live feed from the demonstration lab. "We've been watching," Jorge said without looking up. "You fixed it." "Yeah." Just like that. Walked in, changed one setting, fixed an $80 million disaster. 7 microseconds, Ethan said. That's all it took. 7 microseconds, Jorge repeated, shaking his head. "You know what the message boards are saying? The company's Slack channels? They're losing their minds trying to figure out who actually solved it. Half of them think it was some kind of emergency patch from corporate. The other half think Damien pulled off some kind of miracle." "Let them think whatever they want." Patricia closed the laptop and looked at Ethan with the kind of expression that suggested she knew more than she was saying. "Chloe's in the break room. Been drawing horses for the past half hour. She's getting pretty good." "Thanks for watching her. Any time, but Ethan?" Patricia stood up, brushed off her pants. "Maybe it's time people knew who you really are." "I'm maintenance. That's who I am." "That's what you do. It's not who you are." Before Ethan could figure out how to respond to that, his radio crackled again. "Ethan Walker, please report to the executive conference room on floor 8. Ethan Walker to 8. Jorge whistled low. "The executive floor. That's either really good or really bad." "Probably bad," Ethan said. "You going?" Ethan thought about ignoring it. Just collecting Chloe and heading home, pretending the summons had never happened, but he'd learned a long time ago that running from conversations just meant they caught up with you later when you were even less prepared for them. "Yeah," he said. "I'm going." He found Chloe exactly where Patricia said she'd be, surrounded by pieces of pink paper covered in increasingly competent horses. She looked up when he entered, and her face split into a grin. "Dad, look at this one. Patricia showed me how to do the legs so they don't look weird. That's really good, Bug." "Are we going home now?" "Not yet. I have to go talk to someone first." Her face fell slightly. "More work stuff?" "More work stuff, but this should be quick." "That's what you said last time." "Last time was different." "How?" "Last time the building was on fire, metaphorically speaking." Chloe considered this. "And now it's not on fire?" "Now it's just smoking a little bit." "That's better, I guess." "That's the spirit. Stay here with Patricia, okay? I'll be back soon." He took the elevator up to 8, which he'd never actually visited before. The executive floor was exactly what you'd expect. Expensive carpet, real art on the walls instead of motivational posters, the kind of furniture that cost more than his monthly rent. A receptionist who definitely recognized he didn't belong there, but was too professional to say anything directed him to the conference room at the end of the hall. Olivia was waiting inside, along with someone from HR, whose name Ethan had forgotten, and a man in an expensive suit who had lawyer written all over him. "Mr. Walker," Olivia said. "Please, sit." Ethan sat. The chair was extremely comfortable, which somehow made him more nervous. "I want to start by thanking you," Olivia continued. "What you did today saved this company. The contract, the jobs, the future we've been building. I don't think you fully understand the magnitude of what would have happened if we'd lost that demonstration." "I understand magnitude," Ethan said quietly. "Right, of course." Olivia glanced at the lawyer, who nodded slightly. "We'd like to offer you a new position. Lead systems engineer reporting directly to me. Significant salary increase, full benefits, stock options. You'd be overseeing the entire technical integration team." The room went quiet. Ethan looked at each of them in turn. Olivia with her calculating gray eyes, the HR person with their professional smile, the lawyer watching him with the blank expression of someone paid to notice things. "No," Ethan said. Olivia blinked. "No? I appreciate the offer, but no. Can I ask why?" "Sure, because I have a 6-year-old daughter who's currently downstairs drawing horses on pink paper while she waits for her dad to finish work so they can go home and eat dinner. I take that job. I'm here 70 hours a week, missing school plays and parent-teacher conferences and all the stuff that actually matters. So no." "We can work around your schedule," the HR person said. "Flexible hours, remote work options. I've heard that before. It never works out the way they promise." Olivia leaned forward. "Mr. Walker, I don't think you understand what I'm offering. This is a career-level position, life-changing money, the opportunity to actually use your skills instead of equate. Instead of what, fixing lights and air conditioners?" Ethan met her eyes. You know what I did today? I changed one setting by 7 microseconds. That's it. Took me less than a minute. The rest of the time I was just a guy in a maintenance uniform that people don't notice. And that works for me. That lets me be there when Chloe needs me. That lets me be the parent she deserves. You could hire help, the lawyer suggested. Childcare, nannies. She doesn't need a nanny. She needs her dad. Olivia sat back in her chair, studying him. You know I could just reassign you. You're already an employee. I have the authority to move you to whatever department I think best serves the company. You could, Ethan agreed, and then I'd quit. You'd quit. Walk away from a steady job in a difficult economy. I've walked away from bigger things. The silence that followed felt heavy, like it was carrying the weight of all the conversations they weren't having. Finally, Olivia nodded once. All right, she said. Then let's talk about what you would accept. 2 hours later, Ethan walked out of the executive conference room with a new title: Senior Maintenance Specialist with Engineering Consultation Authority, and a 20% raise. Not the life-changing money Olivia had initially offered, but enough to make a difference. Enough to maybe fix the heat in his apartment before winter. Maybe put a little extra in savings. More importantly, he'd gotten it in writing that his hours stayed the same. No mandatory overtime, no weekend calls unless it was an actual emergency. And Chloe could still come to work with him when school was out, same as always. I still think you're making a mistake, Olivia had said when they finalized the terms. You have a gift. You should be using it. I am using it, Ethan had replied. Just not the way you want me to. Now, riding the elevator back down to the basement, he felt the exhaustion of the day settle onto him like a physical weight. He'd saved the company, negotiated a better position, and somehow managed to keep his life from being completely upended in the process. Small victories. Chloe was asleep in the break room when he got there, curled up in one of the chairs with her backpack as a pillow. Patricia was sitting nearby, reading something on her phone. How'd it go? She asked quietly. Better than expected. They offer you a promotion? Yeah. You take it? Parts of it. Patricia smiled. Smart man. Ethan gathered up Chloe's drawings carefully, folding them so they wouldn't crease. Then he gently lifted her into his arms. She stirred slightly but didn't wake, just shifted against his shoulder and kept breathing in that slow, deep rhythm of childhood sleep. See you tomorrow, Patricia whispered. See you tomorrow. The bus was late, which was normal. Ethan stood at the stop with Chloe in his arms, watching the city lights start to come on as the sun dropped toward the horizon. His shoulders ached from carrying her, and his feet hurt from standing all day, and he was pretty sure he'd forgotten to eat lunch at some point. But the company was saved, the contract was signed, and he was going home to make dinner for his daughter, same as he did every night. When the bus finally arrived, Ethan climbed aboard carefully, making sure not to bang Chloe's head on the door frame. The driver, same guy as this morning, nodded at him. Long day? The driver asked. You could say that. They're all long days, man. Yeah, I guess they are. Ethan found a seat near the back and settled Chloe against his shoulder. Through the window, he could see the Novaris building shrinking in the distance, all glass and steel, and the reflected light of a sun that was already setting. Somewhere in that building, engineers were probably still celebrating, rewriting the story of what happened, making plans for the future now that they actually had one. And somewhere in there, Damian Cross was probably sitting alone in his office, trying to figure out how a maintenance worker had known something he'd missed. Sarah Kemp was probably reviewing the encoder calibration data, understanding now what she should have caught before. Ryan Brooks was probably telling anyone who'd listen about the day everything almost fell apart and somehow came back together. But Ethan wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about the leftover pasta in his fridge at home and whether Chloe would eat it without complaining, and if he remembered to pay the electric bill before it was due. Normal things, small things, the kind of things that actually mattered. The bus wheezed its way through traffic, and Chloe slept against his shoulder. And somewhere in the city, a day that had started with disaster ended with something that almost felt like hope. Almost. The pasta was fine. Chloe ate it without complaining, which was about as close to a win as Ethan usually got on a weeknight. They sat at the small table in their apartment, the one that wobbled unless you wedged a folded piece of cardboard under the short leg, and Chloe told him about the horses she'd drawn and how Patricia said she was getting really good at shading. She said if I keep practicing, I could maybe draw people next, Chloe said around a mouthful of pasta. Real people, not stick figures. That's great, Bug. Can we get more colored pencils? The green one broke. Ethan thought about the 20% raise that wouldn't show up in his paycheck for another 2 weeks. Yeah, we can get colored pencils. The good kind? We'll see what they have. After dinner, Chloe brushed her teeth and changed into pajamas that were getting too small. He'd need to buy new ones soon, add that to the list, and curled up on the pull-out couch with the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. Ethan read her half a chapter from the book they were working through, some story about a girl who found a magical garden, and by the time he looked up, Chloe was asleep. He sat there for a minute, just watching her breathe. Her hair was getting long. He should probably learn how to braid it properly instead of just pulling it back in a ponytail every morning. Her mother would have known how to braid it. Her mother would have known a lot of things. Ethan stood up carefully, turned off the lamp, and walked to the small window that looked out over the parking lot. 3 stories down, someone was having an argument next to a car with a busted taillight. The sounds carried up through the night air, angry voices, accusations, the particular kind of fight that had been brewing for months and was finally boiling over. He touched the watch on his wrist without meaning to. Old habit. The crystal was cracked, had been for years, but the watch still kept time well enough. Sarah had given it to him on their first anniversary, back when they were young and stupid and thought they had forever. Back when he'd been a different person entirely. His phone buzzed. Text message from a number he didn't recognize. This is Ryan Brooks. Got your number from HR. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to say thanks again for today. You saved all our asses. If you ever want to grab a beer and talk shop, let me know. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, no problem. Glad it worked out. He almost left it there, but then added, probably not on the beer though. Got early mornings with my kid. The response came back immediately. Totally understand. Offer stands anyway. Ethan set the phone down and walked to the kitchen to clean up the dinner dishes. The hot water took forever to heat up. Another thing on the list of repairs this apartment needed that the landlord kept promising to handle, and by the time he'd washed everything and put it away, it was almost 9. He should go to sleep. Tomorrow was Friday, another early morning, another day of fixing things that broke and ignoring things he couldn't fix. But instead, he pulled out his laptop, old, running slow, the battery only held about 30 minutes of charge, and opened it on the table. The search bar sat empty, cursor blinking. Ethan hadn't looked himself up in over a year, hadn't checked to see if his name still appeared in engineering journals or conference proceedings or any of the places it used to show up back when he'd been someone worth mentioning. But tonight, for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he typed in Ethan Walker Systems Engineering and hit enter. The results loaded slowly. Most of them were recent, articles about Novaris, mentions of the demonstration, a few tech blogs that had picked up the story of the near disaster and miraculous recovery. None of them mentioned his name specifically, just vague references to the engineering team and quick thinking by Novaris staff. He scrolled further back 3 years, 4, and there it was. Ethan Walker named lead engineer on quantum dynamics automation project. That one was 5 years old, from back when he'd worked at a company that didn't exist anymore. The article had his photo, younger, cleaner, wearing a suit that actually fit, smiling like he knew something everyone else didn't. Below that, another article. Walker's team achieves breakthrough in predictive calibration systems. That one had Sarah in it too, standing next to him at some conference. She was pregnant in the photo, maybe 6 months, glowing the way people always said pregnant women glowed, though at the time she'd complained constantly about her back hurting and not being able to sleep. Ethan closed the laptop before he could scroll any further. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Chloe's breathing was soft and steady from the pull-out couch. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. The kind of sounds that meant he'd managed to build something stable out of the wreckage of everything that came before. He walked to the small closet in the hallway and pulled down a box from the top shelf. Cardboard, taped shut. The kind of thing you packed once and then tried to forget existed. He'd moved it from the old apartment to this one without ever opening it, just carried it along like cargo he was obligated to transport but never examine. Tonight, he pulled off the tape. Inside were the pieces of a life he'd stopped living. Sarah's death certificate, folded into neat quarters like that, would somehow make it smaller. Photos from their wedding, both of them young and stupid and absolutely certain they had it all figured out. His old company ID badge from Quantum Dynamics. A stack of engineering journals with his articles in them, papers about calibration theory and systems integration that people had actually cited in their own research. And at the bottom, a small envelope with Chloe's name written on it in Sarah's handwriting. Ethan had found it in Sarah's desk drawer 3 days after the accident, along with a dozen other envelopes, one for each year until Chloe turned 18. Letters Sarah had written while she was sick, during those last few months when they both knew what was coming, but nobody wanted to say it out loud. He'd given Chloe the first one on her 4th birthday, sitting with her while she tried to sound out the words she couldn't quite read yet. He'd given her the second one on her 5th. The third one was still in this box, waiting for next month when she turned 7. Ethan pulled it out, held it up to the light. He couldn't see through the envelope, but he knew what was probably inside. Some story about Chloe as a baby. Some piece of advice about growing up. Some way for Sarah to still be a mother even though she was gone. He put the envelope back in the box, closed it, and shoved it back into the closet. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Ethan lay in his bed, the one in the tiny bedroom that barely fit a double mattress, and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the building settling around him. Someone upstairs was watching TV too loud. Someone else was running water through pipes that needed replacing. The whole structure creaking and groaning like it was tired of holding itself up. He thought about the offer Olivia had made. Lead systems engineer. Real money. The kind of career he'd walked away from when Sarah got sick and someone needed to be there for Chloe full time. He'd told himself at the time it was temporary, just until things stabilized. Just until he figured out how to be a single parent and still maintain some kind of professional life. 3 years later, he was still telling himself that. His phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from a number that actually was in his contacts. Patricia. Saw the news about what you did today? Jorge can't stop talking about it. You're famous in the maintenance department. Don't let it go to your head. Ethan smiled despite himself and typed back, too late. Already ordered a crown. Make sure it fits over that hard hat. See you tomorrow. He set the phone on the nightstand and closed his eyes. Eventually, somewhere around midnight, he managed to fall asleep. The next morning started the same way every morning started. Alarm at 6, shower in a bathroom where the grout was turning black no matter how much he scrubbed it, coffee from a machine that made sounds like it was dying but somehow kept working. Chloe stumbled out of bed around 6:30, complained that her socks didn't match, and refused to eat the cereal he put in front of her until he added more sugar than was probably responsible. They caught the same bus, sat in the same seats, and arrived at Novartis at the same time they always did. But when Ethan swiped his badge at the employee entrance, something was different. The light turned green, same as always, but there was a small envelope taped to the door with his name on it. He pulled it off, opened it. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive paper. Mr. Walker, please stop by my office this morning at your earliest convenience. Olivia Hart. Chloe peered at the note. What's that? Boss wants to talk to me. Are you in trouble? I don't think so. Then why does she want to talk to you? That's what I'm going to find out. He dropped Chloe off with Patricia, who had already set up her crossword station in the break room and had apparently anticipated Chloe's arrival by bringing an extra set of colored pencils. Then he made his way up to 8, feeling like he was walking toward something he couldn't quite see yet, but knew was waiting for him anyway. Olivia's office was at the end of the executive hallway, behind a door with her name on it in letters that probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. He knocked. Come in. The office inside was exactly what he'd expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, furniture that looked uncomfortable but was probably worth thousands, diplomas and awards on the walls documenting every achievement in a life spent achieving things. Olivia sat behind a desk that was almost aggressively clean. Just a laptop and a single coffee cup, and a notebook open to a page covered in neat handwriting. Mr. Walker, she said. Thank you for coming. Your note said earliest convenience, figured I should probably show up. Please sit. Ethan sat. The chair was exactly as uncomfortable as it looked. I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday, Olivia said, about the position I offered you. I thought we settled that. We settled the immediate terms, but I've been thinking about it, and I believe I approached the offer incorrectly. How so? Olivia leaned forward slightly. I made it about what the company needs, what I need. But I should have made it about what you need. I told you what I need: time with my daughter, stable hours, a life that doesn't require me to choose between being a good parent and being a good employee. And I heard that. I did. But here's what I'm thinking. What if you didn't have to choose? Ethan waited. We have a major expansion planned, Olivia continued. New contracts, new projects, new automation systems that are going to require the kind of expertise you demonstrated yesterday. But we're also implementing a new company-wide policy on work-life balance, remote options, flexible scheduling, on-site childcare for employees who need it. On-site childcare. We're converting the old storage wing on the second floor, actual licensed childcare, not just a room where kids sit around. Educational programs, activities, the works. It'll be ready in about 6 weeks. Ethan thought about Chloe spending her days in a proper childcare center instead of sitting in break rooms drawing horses while Patricia did crosswords. He thought about not having to worry about school schedules and sick days and all the complicated logistics of being a single parent with a job that didn't care about any of that. That's good, he said carefully, for the employees who need it, including you, if you wanted it. I already told you I'm not taking the engineering position. I know. But what if there was something else? Something between where you are now and where I wanted you to be? Olivia pulled out a folder from her desk drawer and slid it across to him. Ethan opened it. Inside was a job description for a position that didn't currently exist. Technical Integration Consultant, he read aloud. Reports to CEO, responsible for oversight of critical systems, consultation on major projects, and training of engineering staff on advanced calibration techniques. He looked up. This is basically the engineering position with a different title. It's different in the ways that matter, Olivia said. You'd work 25 hours a week. No mandatory overtime unless there's an actual emergency, and those would be rare. You'd consult on projects, not run them. Teach the engineering team what you know, but let them do the implementation. And the pay? She told him the pay. It was more than double what he made now, even with the raise from yesterday. You'd have your mornings with Chloe, Olivia continued. You could drop her at childcare, work until 3, pick her up and go home. Or work from home some days if that's easier. The point is flexibility. The point is giving you the space to be both things at once. Why? Ethan asked. Why are you pushing this so hard? Olivia was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, less CEO, more human. Because I watched what happened yesterday. I watched my entire engineering team panic and fail while you stayed calm and fixed it. And I realized something. I've been so focused on hiring people with the right credentials and the right pedigree that I've been missing the people who actually know what they're doing. She paused. My father built this company from nothing. He hired based on talent, not resumes. I got so caught up in trying to prove I deserved to run his company that I forgot that part. You reminded me. I'm just one person. You're one person who saved an $80 million contract. One person who sees things other people miss. One person who clearly has history in this industry that goes deeper than a maintenance position. She looked at him directly. I don't know what happened that made you walk away from engineering, and I'm not going to pry, but I'm going to offer you the chance to come back to it on your own terms. Terms that don't require you to sacrifice being a father. Ethan looked down at the job description again. 25 hours a week, flexible schedule, on-site childcare. The kind of arrangement he'd thought was impossible, the kind of thing companies claimed to offer but never actually delivered. I need to think about it, he said. Take the weekend. Let me know Monday. He stood up, folder in hand. Can I ask you something? Of course. Yesterday, during the demonstration, when everything failed and Kane gave you 1 hour to fix it, you didn't panic. You didn't fall apart. You just stood there and handled it. Where'd you learn to do that? Olivia smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. My father died 6 months after I took over the company. Heart attack at his desk, completely unexpected. I had to run a board meeting 2 hours after I found out. I learned pretty quickly that falling apart was a luxury I couldn't afford. I'm sorry. Don't be. It made me who I am. She picked up her coffee cup, realized it was empty, set it back down. We all have things we carry. The question is whether we let them break us or make us stronger. Ethan thought about the box in his closet, about Sarah's letters, About 3 years of maintenance work and early mornings, and trying to be enough for a daughter who deserved better. Yeah, he said quietly. I guess that's the question. He left the office and took the elevator down, but instead of going to the basement, he got off at 7. The demonstration lab was quiet this morning, most of the engineering team probably still recovering from yesterday's chaos. But Sarah Kemp was there, sitting at one of the workstations, staring at lines of code on her screen. She looked up when he approached. Ethan, didn't expect to see you up here. Had a meeting with Olivia. How'd that go? Complicated. He gestured at the screen. What are you working on? Going through the encoder calibration code, trying to understand how we missed the phase offset issue. She pulled up a simulation on a second monitor. The thing is, our testing was thorough. We ran hundreds of scenarios, but we never pushed the system to sustained maximum capacity because you were afraid of breaking it before the demo, Ethan finished. Exactly. Which means we optimized for the wrong thing. We optimized for making it to the demonstration instead of making sure the demonstration would actually work. That's pretty common, actually. People test for the conditions they expect instead of the conditions that might happen. Sarah turned to look at him. Ryan showed me some of your old papers. From your time at Quantum Dynamics, your work on predictive calibration was pretty groundbreaking. That was a long time ago. But you still know it, still understand it, better than most people currently working in the field. She paused. Why maintenance, Ethan? Someone with your background? You could have gone anywhere, done anything. Why here? Why this? Ethan pulled up a chair and sat down. For a moment, he just watched the simulation running on her screen. Lines of code executing in perfect sequence. Virtual machines performing virtual tasks in a virtual world where nothing really broke and nothing really mattered. My wife got sick, he said finally. Cancer. Aggressive, fast-moving. By the time they caught it, it was already stage 4. She had maybe 6 months. Sarah's expression softened. I'm sorry. I was working 80-hour weeks at Quantum, running a major project, climbing the ladder. All the things you're supposed to do when you're trying to build a career. And then Sarah got diagnosed, and suddenly none of that mattered. Someone needed to take Chloe to school, to doctor's appointments, to just be there for her while her mother was dying. And it needed to be me. What about family, friends? Sarah's parents are dead. Mine live in Oregon, and we haven't spoken in years. Friends are great for casseroles and sympathy, but they're not going to raise your kid. He leaned back in the chair. So I quit. Walked away from the project, from the career, from everything. Spent 6 months being a full-time dad while Sarah got worse. And then she died, and I had to figure out how to keep going. But why maintenance? You could have found another engineering job with better hours. You ever try to get an engineering position when you've got a 6-month gap in your resume and you're completely honest about why? Companies say they value work-life balance, but they don't hire people who've actually had to choose family over work. They hire people who claim they can do both and then quietly sacrifice one for the other. Sarah was quiet for a moment. So you took a job where nobody would ask questions. I took a job where I could work my 8 hours, collect my paycheck, and be there when Chloe needed me, where I didn't have to pretend to be someone I wasn't anymore. He stood up. And it worked. For 3 years it worked. Boring, stable, exactly what we needed. Until yesterday. Until yesterday. Sarah looked at him carefully. Olivia offered you something, didn't she? I can see it on your face. Yeah, she did. Are you going to take it? I don't know yet. Can I give you some advice? Unsolicited, but I'm going to give it anyway. Ethan gestured for her to continue. Take it, Sarah said. Not for the company, not for the money. Take it because hiding what you can do doesn't protect you. It just makes you smaller. And eventually, being smaller than you are becomes its own kind of prison. She turned back to her code before he could respond, and Ethan left her there, her words following him down the hallway like ghosts. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine maintenance. A jammed printer on floor 4, a leak in the water fountain on 3, the ongoing mystery of why the elevator to the executive floor made that grinding sound between the 6th and 7th floors. Normal work, simple work, the kind of thing Ethan could do without thinking, which left plenty of room for thinking about everything else. By 3 o'clock, when he collected Chloe from Patricia's unofficial daycare operation, he still hadn't made a decision. They took the bus home in silence. Chloe absorbed in a book she'd borrowed from Patricia, Ethan staring out the window at the city passing by. That night, after dinner and after Chloe had fallen asleep, Ethan pulled out the box again. This time he opened Sarah's letter, not the one meant for Chloe's 7th birthday, but a different one. One addressed to him, found in the same drawer marked, "When you're ready to stop punishing yourself." He'd never opened it. 3 years, and he'd carried this letter around without once breaking the seal. Tonight, he did. The handwriting was shaky. Sarah had written this near the end, when even holding a pen had become difficult. But the words were clear. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you're still beating yourself up about it. Stop. You didn't fail me. You didn't fail Chloe. You made the choice any decent human being would make, and I loved you for it. But here's the thing, and I need you to really hear this. Being a good father doesn't mean erasing who you are. It means showing Chloe what it looks like when someone uses their gifts to make the world a little better. She needs to see that. She needs to see you be the person I fell in love with, the one who could fix anything, who saw problems nobody else saw, who believed he could make things better just by understanding them clearly enough. That person didn't die when I did. He's just scared. And I get it. I do. But eventually you're going to have to decide whether you're hiding to protect Chloe or hiding to protect yourself. Love you forever, Sarah." Ethan read it twice, then a third time. Then he folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. But this time he didn't put it back in the box. He set it on the table next to his laptop, where he could see it, where it could see him. Saturday morning, Ethan took Chloe to the park. They fed ducks that probably didn't need feeding and played on a playground where half the equipment looked mildly dangerous, and the other half looked aggressively dangerous. Chloe made friends with another kid for exactly 45 minutes before they had a fight about whose turn it was on the swings and stopped being friends. Normal life. Simple life. The kind of life Ethan had built specifically because it was manageable and stable and wouldn't ask more of him than he could give. But on Monday morning, when he walked into Olivia's office at 8 a.m. sharp, he had his answer ready. Olivia looked up from her laptop when Ethan knocked. She'd been expecting him. That was obvious from the way she'd already cleared space on her desk and had 2 coffee cups waiting, still steaming. "Mr. Walker," she said. "Right on time." "I try." "Coffee? It's actually good. I have it brought in from a place downtown." "Sure." She pushed one of the cups toward him, and he sat down in the same uncomfortable chair from Friday. The coffee was good, better than anything that came out of the break room pot that had probably been brewing since the previous century. "So," Olivia said, "have you thought about my offer?" "Yeah, I have." "And?" Ethan took another sip of coffee, buying himself a few extra seconds. Outside the windows, the city was waking up, cars moving through traffic, people walking to jobs they probably didn't love, the whole machine of daily life grinding forward whether anyone wanted it to or not. "I'll take it," he said, "with conditions." Olivia's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. "I'm listening. First condition, if the childcare center isn't ready in 6 weeks like you said, the deal's off. I'm not doing this without knowing Chloe's got somewhere safe to be during the day." "Done. What else?" "Second, I want it in writing that I can't be fired for refusing overtime or weekend work except in genuine emergencies. And I get to define what counts as an emergency." "That's reasonable. Anything else?" "Yeah, one more thing." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Damian Cross gets brought into this. I know what happened last week wasn't his finest moment, but he's still the chief engineer. If I'm going to consult on projects, I need to work with him, not around him. And that only works if he's actually willing to listen." Olivia was quiet for a moment. "You're asking me to fix a relationship that might not be fixable. I'm asking you to try. Because if he spends the next 6 months undermining everything I suggest out of wounded pride, this whole thing falls apart anyway. And if he refuses, then we'll deal with that when it happens, but at least give him the chance." Olivia picked up her phone and typed something quickly. Less than a minute later, there was a knock at the door. "Come in," she called. Damian Cross walked in looking like a man who'd been summoned to his own execution. He saw Ethan sitting there and his jaw tightened, but he didn't walk back out. "Damian," Olivia said, "sit down." He sat in the chair next to Ethan's, carefully not looking at him. I've offered Ethan a position as technical integration consultant, Olivia continued. He's accepted, with conditions. One of those conditions is that you two need to find a way to work together. Damien's face went through several expressions before settling on something that might have been resignation. You're serious? Completely. Damien stopped, started again. With all due respect, he's been in maintenance for 3 years. That's not exactly the background you want for someone consulting on major engineering projects. Before that, he was lead engineer at Quantum Dynamics, Olivia said calmly. Published 14 papers on systems calibration. Led the team that developed predictive automation protocols that half the industry is still using. Want me to keep going? Damien looked at Ethan like he was seeing him for the first time. Quantum Dynamics. Yeah, Ethan said. You worked on the Helix project, the predictive calibration system. I ran it. Damien seemed to be recalculating everything. That was revolutionary work. Changed the entire approach to automation feedback loops. It was a good team. Why the hell are you working maintenance? Long story, not particularly interesting. Damien sat back in his chair, looking like he was trying to solve a math problem that didn't add up. You let me kick you out of the building? You had security escort you away from the lab. Why didn't you say something? Show me your credentials? Would you have listened? The question hung in the air between them. Damien opened his mouth, closed it again. Finally, he said, Probably not. He stopped, tried again. I was so focused on the demonstration going perfectly that I stopped hearing anything that suggested it might not. That's on me. Yeah, Ethan said, it is. I'm sorry for what happened, for not listening. Damien looked at Olivia, then back at Ethan. If you're coming on as a consultant, I'll work with you. But I need to know this isn't some kind of power play, that you're not here to show up the engineering team. I'm here because I need the money and the schedule works for my daughter, Ethan said bluntly. You want to run the projects? Fine, run them. I'll consult, train your team, and go home at 3 to pick up my kid. That's the deal. Damien studied him for a long moment. All right, then we'll make it work. Good, Olivia said, because you're both going to need to work together on the Kane contract expansion. He's adding another $40 million to the deal, wants 3 more automated production lines by next quarter. I'm putting Damien in charge of the project and Ethan on oversight. Both men looked at her. Starting when? Damien asked. Today. I'm sending the project specs to both of you this afternoon. Ethan felt something that might have been panic trying to crawl up his throat. Today? I'm still in maintenance. I need to transition. You have until the end of the week to wrap up your current responsibilities. Jorge's already been briefed on taking over your workload. Starting next Monday, you're officially a consultant. Olivia's expression softened slightly. And Ethan, the childcare center is ahead of schedule. It'll be ready in 4 weeks, not 6. I made sure of it. After the meeting, Ethan and Damien walked to the elevator together in uncomfortable silence. When the doors closed and they were alone, Damien said, The Helix project. I studied it in grad school, used your calibration protocols as the basis for my thesis. How'd that work out? Got me hired here, so pretty well. Damien paused. Why didn't you stay in the field? After Quantum folded? Life got complicated. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. The elevator reached the 7th floor and Damien got out, but he held the door open. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're taking the position. We need someone who actually knows what they're doing. You know what you're doing. I know theory. I know what I learned in classrooms and labs. You know how things actually work in the real world. There's a difference. The doors started to close and Damien let them, leaving Ethan alone for the descent to the basement. When he got there, Jorge was waiting with a knowing smile. Heard you're moving up in the world, Jorge said. News travels fast. Building this size? Faster than you'd think. Jorge leaned back in his chair. You gonna forget about us little people now that you're a fancy consultant? I'm going to forget to file my timesheet correctly and probably show up to at least one meeting with grease on my shirt. That's the spirit. Ethan spent the week training Jorge on his remaining maintenance routes, introducing him to the quirks of every system in the building. The HVAC on 3 that only worked if you kicked it in a specific spot. The elevator to executive that made grinding noises but was actually fine. the coffee maker in the break room that required a very particular sequence of buttons to brew anything that wasn't completely undrinkable. "This is like learning a secret language," Jorge complained on Wednesday. "Welcome to maintenance. Everything's held together with duct tape and prayers." "You don't pray?" "Fine. Duct tape and stubbornness." Thursday evening, after the building had mostly cleared out, Ethan found himself standing outside the demonstration lab. The machines were quiet, powered down for the night, but he could still hear them in his memory. The hum of motors, the whisper of belts, the rhythm of automation doing what automation did best. "You okay?" He turned. Sarah Kemp was standing in the doorway of the lab, laptop bag over her shoulder. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Just thinking." "About?" "About how 3 years ago I would have given anything to walk away from rooms like this, and now I'm about to spend my days back in them." Sarah walked over to stand next to him, both of them looking at the machinery through the glass. "You know what I think? I think you never really walked away. You just convinced yourself you did. That's supposed to make me feel better?" "It's supposed to make you feel honest." She shifted her laptop bag. "Can I tell you something? When I first started here, I was terrified. Fresh out of grad school, first real job, convinced I was going to screw up and everyone would realize I didn't belong. Know what got me through it?" "What?" "Reading your papers, the ones from Quantum. The way you broke down complex problems into understandable pieces. Made me realize that good engineering isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about seeing clearly and helping other people see clearly, too." "I'm not sure I see all that clearly anymore. You saw that phase offset when nobody else did. You fixed it in under a minute. I'd say your vision's fine." Sarah checked her watch. "I've got to go, but Ethan, whatever made you walk away before, I hope you've made peace with it, because you're about to be back in the arena, and it only works if you actually want to be there." She left, and Ethan stayed a few minutes longer, watching the quiet machines and thinking about Sarah's letter, about hiding versus protecting, about being smaller than you were versus showing your daughter what it looked like to use your gifts. Friday was his last day in maintenance. Patricia brought cupcakes that were slightly lopsided but tasted fine. Jorge gave a speech that was mostly jokes about Ethan finally escaping the basement. A few other people from building services stopped by to say congratulations and ask if he'd still fix the coffee maker when it broke because nobody else knew how. "I'll make time," Ethan promised. Chloe sat in the corner of the break room, drawing on her pink paper, occasionally looking up to watch the celebration with the bemused expression of a kid who didn't quite understand what all the fuss was about. When the cupcakes were gone and people had drifted back to work, Patricia pulled Ethan aside. "You nervous?" she asked, terrified. "Good. Means you care." She glanced at Chloe. "She know it's changing?" "I told her I'm getting a different job. Same building, different work. She okay with it?" She asked if it meant we'd have more money for colored pencils. I said yes. She said that was cool. Ethan smiled slightly. 6-year-old priorities. 6-year-olds got it figured out better than the rest of us, Patricia said. They know what matters. That evening, Ethan took Chloe to the grocery store and let her pick out the expensive colored pencils, the set with 72 colors instead of the cheap 24-pack they usually got. She studied each pencil like they were precious gems, reading the names aloud. Cerulean blue. What's cerulean mean? It's a type of blue, like sky blue. Why don't they just call it sky blue? Because cerulean sounds fancier. Adults are weird. You have no idea, bug. They walked home with the colored pencils and a bag of groceries that included actual fresh vegetables instead of just the frozen kind. Small luxuries, but they felt significant, like evidence that things were changing in ways that might actually be good. That night, after Chloe was asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with the contract Olivia had given him. He'd read it 3 times already, but he read it again anyway, looking for catches that weren't there. The terms were exactly what they'd discussed. 25 hours a week, flexible scheduling, on-site childcare, salary that would let them move to a better apartment, maybe save something for emergencies. At the bottom of the contract was a line for his signature. Ethan pulled out a pen, not the cheap one he usually used, but the nice one Sarah had given him years ago, the one he'd kept in the back of a drawer because using it felt like admitting he was still the person who deserved nice pens. He signed his name and dated it. Done. Committed. No going back. Monday morning felt different from the start. Ethan still took the same bus, still held Chloe's hand walking into the building, but instead of his maintenance uniform, he wore khakis and a button-down shirt that he'd had to iron because he couldn't remember the last time he'd needed to look professional. "You look weird," Chloe informed him. "Thanks, Bug." "I mean, you look nice, but also weird." "I'll take it." The child care center wasn't ready yet, still another 3 weeks, so Chloe went to Patricia as usual. But Patricia had printed out a welcome sign that said, "Good luck on your first day," and hung it in the break room, which made Chloe giggle and made Ethan's chest feel tight in a way he couldn't quite explain. The 7th floor had a different energy when Ethan arrived. Engineers were clustered around workstations, reviewing the specs for the Kane expansion project. Sarah waved him over to where she and Marcus were discussing software architecture. Damien was in his office on a call, but he nodded at Ethan through the glass. "All right, everyone," Damien said, ending his call and stepping out. "Let's get started. Conference room in 5. The conference room was smaller than the one on 8, but much more lived in. Whiteboards covered in half-erased equations, coffee rings on the table. The accumulated debris of people actually working instead of just pretending to work. Damien pulled up the project specs on the screen. Victor Kane wants 3 additional production lines. Same basic architecture as the current system, but with enhanced capacity and faster throughput. Timeline is aggressive. He wants the first line operational in 10 weeks, the other 2 following at 2-week intervals. "That's tight," Marcus said. "It's insane," Sarah corrected, "but it's also $80 million in additional revenue, so we're doing it anyway. Ethan's going to be consulting on the integration," Damien continued, and every eye in the room turned toward him. "Which means we're going to do this right instead of fast. We're going to test at full capacity from the start. We're going to listen when problems come up instead of assuming we know better. And we're going to build systems that actually work instead of systems that look good in presentations." He looked at Ethan. "Anything to add?" Ethan stood up. Public speaking had never been his favorite thing, but 3 years of being invisible had apparently cured him of whatever anxiety he'd once felt about it. "I'm not here to run this project," he said. "That's Damien's job. I'm here to make sure we don't repeat last week's disaster. So here's how it's going to work. You all keep doing what you're good at: design, implementation, testing. But when something seems wrong, even if you can't explain why, you say something. You don't bury it. You don't ignore it. You bring it up, and we figure it out together." "What if we're wrong?" one of the younger engineers asked, kid named Tyler, who looked like he was about 12. "Then we're wrong. That's fine. Better to investigate a false alarm than miss a real problem." Ethan looked around the room. "I spent 3 years in maintenance listening to these systems run. I can hear problems before they show up in diagnostics. But I can't hear everything. I need you all paying attention too." The meeting went on for another hour, breaking down timelines and assigning responsibilities. Ethan mostly listened, getting a feel for how the team worked together, where the strengths were, where the gaps might be. Sarah was brilliant with software architecture, but sometimes missed mechanical implications. Marcus understood hardware perfectly, but occasionally overlooked how the software would interact with it. Damien could see the big picture, but sometimes moved too fast to catch the details. A good team. Not perfect, but good. They could make this work. When the meeting ended, Damien pulled Ethan aside. "That went better than I expected." "Were you expecting it to go badly?" "I was expecting at least one person to question why we're listening to the maintenance guy. Give it time. I'm sure someone will." Damien almost smiled. "Probably. But for now, let's just try to build something that doesn't explode." The next 3 weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both familiar and strange. Ethan would arrive at 7, drop Chloe with Patricia, and head up to 7 where the engineering team was already deep into the expansion project. He'd review their progress, listen to the test runs, catch the small deviations that meant something was heading toward a problem. Most of the time, he was right. Once or twice, he was wrong, but the team started trusting that when he flagged something, it was worth investigating. Sarah pulled him aside one afternoon while they were testing the first production line's calibration sequences. "You know what's different about working with you versus most consultants?" "What?" "You actually admit when you don't know something. Most consultants would rather die than say, 'I'm not sure,' but I'm not sure about a lot of things. Doesn't seem worth pretending otherwise." "See, that's exactly what I mean." The child care center opened on schedule, actually 2 days early, which Ethan suspected was Olivia pulling strings to make sure her promise was kept. It was nicer than he'd expected, with actual toys and books and a playground that didn't look like it would give kids tetanus. The staff seemed competent and kind, and when he dropped Chloe off that first morning, she barely looked back at him before running off to investigate the art supplies. "She'll be fine," one of the teachers said, seeing his expression. "I know, it's just... First time leaving her with strangers?" "No, I've left her before. Just never somewhere this nice." The teacher smiled. "We'll take good care of her. You can call any time if you want to check in." Ethan did call. 3 times that first day. By the second day, he'd managed to restrain himself to just once. By the end of the week, he could make it until lunch without needing to confirm she was still alive and happy. "You're worse than the helicopter parents," Patricia teased when he admitted to the phone calls. "Helicopter parents hover. I'm just hovering, but from a distance." "That's completely different." "If you say so." 6 weeks into the new position, Ethan was in the demonstration lab watching the first Kane expansion line run through its paces when Olivia appeared beside him. He hadn't heard her approach. She was good at that, moving quietly through spaces she owned. "How's it looking?" she asked. "Good. Really good, actually. The team did solid work. Because you kept them from cutting corners. Because Damien let me. That's the part that matters." They watched the machinery in silence for a moment. The robotic arms moved with the same precision as the original system, but this time Ethan could hear nothing wrong. Just clean mechanical harmony, every component doing exactly what it was designed to do. "I got an email from Victor Kane this morning," Olivia said. "He's bringing 3 other investors to see the new lines next month. Wants to use them as proof of concept for a much larger project." "How much larger?" $200 million, maybe more." Ethan whistled low. "That's a lot of pressure." "It is. But I'm not worried." She looked at him. "You know why?" "Why?" "Because I finally learned to hire people who know what they're doing instead of people who look like they should know what they're doing. Turns out there's a difference." "Took you long enough." "Took my father 20 years to learn it. I figured it out in 2. I'll take the win." She left him there, and Ethan continued watching the machinery run. In 3 hours, he'd pick up Chloe from the childcare center. They'd take the bus home. Though he'd been looking at apartments closer to work, places where Chloe could have her own bedroom, and the heat actually worked consistently. Maybe in another few months, when he'd built up enough savings. Small steps. That's how you rebuilt a life. Not dramatic gestures or sudden transformations, but small, deliberate steps in a direction that felt right. That evening, after dinner, Chloe was drawing at the table with her cerulean blue pencil when she asked, "Dad, do you like your new job?" "Yeah, Bug, I do." "Better than the old one?" Ethan thought about that. "Different, but good different." "Are we going to move to a new apartment?" "Maybe. Would you want to?" She considered it seriously. "Only if Patricia can still visit." "Patricia can always visit." "Then okay, but I want my own room." "That's the plan." "And a window. I want a window in my room." "I'll see what I can do." She went back to her drawing. A horse, naturally, but this one actually looked like a horse instead of a dog with delusions of grandeur. Her tongue stuck out slightly in concentration, the same way Sarah's used to when she was focused on something. Ethan's phone buzzed. Text from Damien. "First expansion line passed all final tests. Kane's approved for installation next week. Good work." He typed back, "Team effort." The response came immediately. "Yeah, but you kept us honest. That counts." Ethan set the phone down and looked around the apartment. Still small, still cramped, still not quite warm enough. But it was theirs. And soon, if things kept going the way they were going, they'd have something better. Not perfect. Never perfect. But better was enough. 2 months after taking the consultant position, Ethan was invited to present at a technical conference on automation systems. He almost said no. Public speaking to a room full of engineers wasn't exactly his idea of a good time. But Sarah had encouraged him, and Damien had said it would be good for the company's reputation. And Olivia had simply told him to do it. So he found himself standing in front of 200 people, talking about predictive calibration and the importance of testing systems under real-world stress conditions. He told them about the demonstration disaster, about the phase offset that everyone missed, about how sometimes the most important problems were the ones you could hear before you could measure them. Afterward, a dozen people wanted to talk to him, ask questions, exchange contact information. One of them was a recruiter from a major automation firm offering double what Novaris was paying. "Thanks," Ethan said, "but I'm good where I am." "You sure?" "This is a significant opportunity." "I'm sure. I've got 25 hours a week, a flexible schedule, and I get to pick my daughter up from school at 3. You can't match that." The recruiter looked confused, like Ethan had just turned down a winning lottery ticket. But Ethan knew what winning actually looked like, and it wasn't another 80-hour work week pretending he could do it all. That night, he video called Chloe from his hotel room. She was staying with Patricia for the 2 days he was at the conference, and she'd apparently convinced Patricia to let her eat ice cream for dinner. "Don't tell your dad," Patricia's voice came from off-screen. "She's telling me right now," Ethan called back. "Traitor," Patricia said to Chloe, but she was laughing. "How was your talk?" Chloe asked. "Boring. Lots of adults talking about math." "That does sound boring. How's the ice cream?" "Chocolate. Patricia says I can have sprinkles too." "Living the dream, Bugs." When they hung up, Ethan sat in the quiet hotel room and realized something. He was happy. Not deliriously, perfectly happy. He still missed Sarah, still felt the hole her absence left in their lives. But he was happy in the small, sustainable way that meant he was building something real instead of just surviving. 6 months into the consultant position, Olivia called him to her office again. "The Kane project's a success," she said without preamble. "All 3 lines operational, exceeding performance targets. He signed for the $200 million expansion and brought in 4 other investors who want similar systems." "That's great." "It is, and it's created a problem." "What kind of problem?" "We need to scale up, hire more engineers, expand the facilities, build out multiple teams. And we need someone to oversee technical integration across all of it." She looked at him. "Someone who knows what good engineering looks like and isn't afraid to stop bad engineering before it becomes expensive disasters." "You want me to take a management position?" "I want you to be director of technical integration. You'd build the team, set the standards, consult on major projects, still flexible hours. I'd make sure of it, but more responsibility, and a lot more money." Ethan didn't answer immediately. He thought about Chloe, about the rhythm they'd finally found, about the life that worked because it was carefully balanced. "Can I think about it?" "Take a week." He talked to Chloe about it that night, explaining it in terms she could understand. More money meant a better apartment, maybe some savings for college someday. More responsibility meant he'd be busier, though he'd still pick her up at 3. "Would you still have time to help with homework?" she asked. "Always." "And read to me before bed?" "Every night." "Then I think you should do it. We could get a place with 2 windows." He talked to Patricia about it, who said he'd be an idiot not to take it. He talked to Sarah Kemp, who said she'd already started building the team in her head and had a list of people they should hire. He talked to Damien, who admitted that managing multiple projects was getting overwhelming and he could use someone handling the technical oversight side. And late one night, when Chloe was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Ethan pulled out Sarah's letter and read it one more time. Being a good father doesn't mean erasing who you are. He'd spent 3 years trying to be small enough to fit into the life he thought he needed to build. But maybe the better lesson was learning to build a life big enough to hold all the parts of himself, the engineer and the father, the person who could fix anything, and the person who knew when to ask for help. Maybe you didn't have to choose. On Monday, he accepted the position. A year after saving the demonstration that almost destroyed everything, Ethan stood in the new demonstration facility, 4 times larger than the original, state-of-the-art equipment, systems designed and tested by the team he'd built. Victor Kane was there with a delegation of investors, watching the production lines run flawlessly at full capacity. Olivia stood next to Ethan, both of them observing from the control room while Damien walked the investors through the technical specifications. "Your team did good work," Olivia said quietly. "They're smart people, they just needed someone to trust them. And someone to keep them from making stupid mistakes." "That too." Through the glass, Ethan could see Chloe in the viewing area with Patricia. She was drawing as usual, but this time she kept looking up to watch the machinery. Interested, engaged, seeing what her father had helped build. "She's proud of you," Olivia observed. "She's 7. She's proud that she can do a cartwheel." "She can be proud of both." The demonstration ran for 30 minutes without a single error. When it finished, the investors erupted in applause. Victor Kane signed contracts that would take the company into the next decade, and Ethan just watched the machines power down smoothly, exactly as they were supposed to, the way they would keep doing day after day because someone had taken the time to build them right. That evening, he and Chloe walked to their new apartment. 2 bedrooms, working heat, windows that actually opened. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs, and it felt like proof that good choices eventually added up to good outcomes. "Dad," Chloe said as they were walking, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you happier now than before?" It was the kind of question that deserved an honest answer, not a comforting one. "Yeah, Bug, I am." "Good, because you smile more now." "Do I?" "Uh-huh. Not all the time, but more." That night, after Chloe was asleep in her own room with her own window, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and pulled out the box one last time. He looked at Sarah's letters, at the photos from when they were young, at all the evidence of a life that had ended too soon. Then he put it all away. Not because he was forgetting, not because it didn't matter anymore, but because carrying the past around every day wasn't the same as honoring it. Sarah had wanted him to use his gifts, to show Chloe what it looked like to be whole instead of hiding. He'd finally figured out how to do that. The next morning, Ethan dropped Chloe at the childcare center and headed up to his office on 7. His team was already there. Sarah coordinating software development, Marcus overseeing hardware integration, 3 new engineers he'd hired specifically because they were willing to admit when they didn't know something. "Morning," Sarah said, handing him coffee. "We've got the quarterly review with Olivia at 10. The Kane expansion team needs your input on the encoder specifications by noon. And Damien wants to know if you can consult on that new project for the medical robotics contract." "Anything on fire?" "Not yet." "Then we're ahead of schedule." He sat down at his desk and looked at the whiteboard on the wall. Project timelines, technical specifications, problems they were solving, and problems they hadn't encountered yet. Good work. Important work. The kind of work that mattered because it helped build things that actually functioned instead of just looking impressive. Through the window, he could see the city spreading out below. Millions of people going about their days, most of them invisible to each other, most of them carrying stories nobody else would ever hear. But Ethan had learned something over the past year. Being invisible wasn't the same as being powerless. Sometimes the people nobody noticed were the ones who held everything together. The maintenance workers who kept the buildings running. The parents who sacrificed careers to raise their kids. The quiet people who fixed what was broken instead of just talking about it. The world needed people like that. It always had. And maybe, if you were lucky and worked hard and made the right choices when it counted, you could be both things at once, seen and unseen, powerful and humble. The person who saved the day and the person who went home at 3 to pick up their daughter. Maybe you didn't have to choose at all. "Ethan?" Sarah was looking at him. "You ready for the meeting?" He grabbed his coffee and stood up. "Yeah, let's go fix something." And together, they did.